Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Love Meets Literature. We are here with another fantastic episode for you. Also, episode 11 if you are keeping count. And today's episode, we will be going over some books that are on our never-ending TBRs, our never-ending to-be-read piles. But before we begin, I'm your host, Rachel, and you can find me on Instagram at Paperbacks and Sketchbooks.
And I am your other host, Joe, and you can find us at Love Meets Literature.
Yes, so please do give us a follow anywhere you find your podcasts. It will help us immensely. So how's it going?
It's going well. I finally finished Baptism of Fire.
Amazing. I felt like Candace from Phineas and Ferb for a second. Or no, Isabella.
Isabella, yeah.
How's it going?
What you doing?
I love that show. Anyway, you finished The Baptism of Fire, finally.
Yes, it took way too long, and I ended up rating it a 3.5 stars. To be honest, I wanted to go lower, but the ending really brought me back. I just wish... You remember how I talked about how he's not really good at writing girly problems?
Girly problems, yeah.
He keeps doing it, and I'm just not a huge fan.
He keeps writing about girly problems.
Yes, I'm using very deliberate parlance here to not gross people out or just be flat out with it.
I mean, women's problems should not be a taboo subject, but I understand that it's still a taboo subject.
Yeah, that's why I'm being obtuse with the wording. I'm comfortable talking about it, but like the wording is carefully chosen here. This book definitely has some pretty heavy trigger warnings when it comes to pregnancy and things like that at the end of the book. It was just very weird towards the end. Like that whole storyline, I think it was meant to immerse you and pull you into this world of like turmoil and good and bad and all this kinds of things. So I understand where he was trying to go with it. My problem was that it felt so just odd for the story.
It was like disjointed from the rest of the book?
Kind of, yeah. A good example is during all of this, she essentially, one of the characters, and I'm this is a spoiler, so if anybody does plan on reading it, but basically one of the characters discovers that she's pregnant. And she's trying to decide what she wants to do. And for some reason, there's this whole discussion between all of the men at the camp on what she should do. And it just felt very weird and very odd.
It feels very Owen and Christina from Grey's Anatomy.
Yeah, that's actually a great comparison.
So, I mean, if you haven't watched Grey's Anatomy, I guess this is kind of a spoiler. So close your ears if you're not on season 8 of Grey's Anatomy yet. But Owen and Christina, two characters on the show, they are married and they're having problems because Christina decided to end a pregnancy because it was her right to choose because she's the woman. We're not getting political here. This is just what happens in the show.
Right.
And Owen gets all mad about it and tries to tell her what she should be doing because they are married and they should have kids. But Christina doesn't want children. And Owen keeps saying, but what if you regret it one day?
Yeah, it's
a very man's way of thinking.
But it's also, for this story, it's very weird energy. Because, like, in Grey's, it obviously makes sense because that's, like, an arc that their relationship is having.
Right.
In this, it was like, I'm fine. It actually makes total sense once you find out that this character is pregnant. You're like, oh, wait, that actually, makes a whole bunch of sense of all these other things that she was experiencing beforehand. But then that whole like tent scene where they're all just like discussing it and she's off in the woods crying alone. You're
That's
just like,
weird.
Yeah, you're like.
It's like the United States Supreme Court.
That's literally what it felt like. They're like, hey, let's take a little bit of like a moment to like have a jury and a judge and
a jury
discuss
about
this.
what this woman should do with her own body.
Right. And she's like, I don't know. That was part just really sort of pulled me out. And that's where I wanted to bring it down. But then Geralt stepped up and he's like, I don't care what she does. It's her choice, blah, blah, blah. Like,
it seems like Geralt is the only good man in this series.
Yeah, they're all... Dandelion is actually way better of a person than you would realize. In the show, it kind of made him to be a bit of a sleazebag, but in the books, he's actually a really good guy. And he was also on the side of like, why are we even having this discussion? You know, like there's no point for us to be talking here. So that was nice. And then like they go and talk to her, and everything seems to be okay, and she's fine and whatever, and she continues traveling with them, to, for the rest of the book. But then the ending was what completely brought me back. So like I love a good ending, and that book was a fantastic ending. Obviously, it's not over. There's still 3 more books, but that was what gave it back at least like that half a star. Because it definitely was going to be a 3. By the end, I was completely turned around, and I really enjoyed it.
Well, this brings up a great question. How do you decide what to rate your books?
I think that is a good question. I very much like to turn my brain off and just enjoy it. So, unless there's like a very clear plot hole in something, I'm pretty much like the book is done. We're good. There's nothing else left. That's kind of the same way I treat like movies. A lot of people don't like whatever movie because there was like a big plot hole, but usually doesn't bother me. That said, I think most books probably fall or start in like the 4 range, and then it goes from there. So it's like if I really liked it and it was amazing writing, or something about it just captivated me, then it'll go up. And then if you do things that I don't like, it goes down from there. So it's almost like kind of like tipping culture, like most people start at 15, and unless you're like, or 20 depending on where you are. And if you're like really good, they'll bump it up, and if you're like horrible, maybe they'll knock a few points off. That's kind of where I am. I'm like default start at like 4 usually.
Well, we all know I like to do everything based on vibes, but
Right.
there is certain criteria where the book has to meet it to be 5 stars for me. So, for example, a 5-star book would be one that has a great plot, great characters, good character arcs. The story develops in a way that makes sense. The characters do things that make sense, and the ending it doesn't have to necessarily be mind-blowing, but it has to end on not necessarily a good note, but it has to end on a note that makes sense for the story.
Right. If it was like a happy, uplifting story, it should end happy and uplifting.
Right. So books that get 5 stars from me, it's usually because I really liked the ending, I really liked the plot, and I really liked the characters.
Yeah, I think I agree with that for the most part.
Also, the writing has to be good. If the writing is bad and it doesn't flow nicely, I'm less likely to rate the book 5 stars.
I think that's fair. The more that I read, the more that I've realized that I'm so much more character driven than I realized before. Because I've read books that have had bad characters, and those pretty much always get DNF'd, or I just don't really care throughout most of the book, and I just read it to finish it. As where before, I definitely thought, and I've even said on the podcast, that I'm more of like an ending person. So the more that I've read, the more I've realized that.
Oh, yeah. And the more you read, your opinions on how you rate books will change as well.
Yeah, definitely.
I also discovered that since I've read a lot more over the past year and a half, I've kind of narrowed down the types of books I really like. So now I'm less likely to rate any book less than 4 stars because I'm kind of sticking to books that I know I will enjoy. Because I don't want to waste my time reading a book that I know I absolutely will not like. Like, you will not find me picking up a science fiction book because I have tried that genre. And every time I either rate the book really low or I don't even finish it.
Yeah, I think that's kind of inevitable. Like a lot of people end up doing that kind of thing.
Right. And I guess that's kind of like my hot take on the whole book community that's online is people are forcing themselves to read books that are out of their comfort zone, which is a good thing. Like, it's nice to try. But let's say you try 3 books that are in a genre you don't typically read, and you don't finish any of those books, or you rate all of those books like 2 stars. But you keep going to pick up the genre. Why?
Yeah, that's kind of like they have like hate watching. It's like hate reading.
Yes, and I never understood the concept of hate reading. Like, people would be like, "Hey, you want to hate read this book?" And I'd be like, why would I read a book that I'm not going to enjoy?"
Yeah, it's synonymous with the hate watching too. I've never understood, like, why would you go watch a 2-hour movie that you know you're going to hate? Like, it doesn't make any sense. And a book is even amplified because that might take you 2 weeks to get through. So I don't know. I don't think I'll ever understand it.
People love to hate on things. It's just the culture now.
I'm more about the positivity.
I know, the positivity, which brings me to my latest read. I loved it. It was called Perfume and Pain by Anna Dorn. And it's a recently new release. I got it in my Aardvark June box, I believe. It was such a messy book. The main character was so messy. Her life was a mess. She wasn't really a good person. And this was a character-driven novel. So we were basically just following this one character and all the decisions that she was making leading up to the ending of the story. I actually really loved it. I was kind of iffy on it only because it is a character-driven novel. There was really no plot. It was just following this character making horrible decisions all day, every day, and her super messy love life. But in the end, she figures it out. She gets it together. And it was just so interesting. It felt like I was watching a reality TV show and it was a train wreck, but I couldn't look away.
That is an interesting sell for a novel.
It was so good. And I really liked the author's writing style. It flowed nicely. It was witty. It was satirical. I feel like it has its audience. Not everybody is going to enjoy it because a lot of people are going to detest the main character whose perspective the book is told from. It's told in first person from our main character's point of view. She's not likable because she keeps making bad decisions and forcing herself into these horrible situations.
Is she kind of like a anti-hero?
I guess. But there's like this pivotal moment in the book where she realizes she needs to get her act together and stop going on week-long benders. So, I mean, she like kind of figures out what she wants and she figures out that she should stop doing stupid things. And she is 36 years old and should stop doing drugs and, be a human in society. She's also an author. She's also trying to write a book and keep making money because she's done some interviews where she's gotten canceled on the internet because she's said offensive things because she's been on drugs during these interviews.
Yeah, it's probably not a good recipe.
So it was just like such an intriguing story about this 30-something-year-old woman trying to get her act together.
Now that you've phrased it like that, I can see kind of the reality TV analogy for sure.
Yes, and just being in her head and hearing her thoughts about certain things, you're like, oh man, this woman needs help.
That is very funny because there's often whenever we watch like 90 Day Fiancé, I'm always like, what were they thinking? Like, who made this decision? Why would they do this?
Literally my thoughts reading this book.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yep. So Perfume and Pain by Anna Dorn is a really good character-driven novel if you're into those. And it kind of has this like underlying love story portion of it, but it doesn't focus on the love at all. It focuses on this main character's decisions that ultimately lead her to happiness.
Well, at least it has a happy ending.
It did have a happy ending, and I was very grateful for that because I was kind of worried that this main character would just, drink herself into oblivion.
That would be a tragedy, as they call it.
That would be a tragedy, but it was very good, and I would recommend it to fellow readers out there. Before we jump into the bulk of this episode, which is going to be some of our TBR books, some of our to-be-read books, which is a lot. My piles are always growing. I said earlier that I was not going to check out any more books from the library, and my spotlight today just happens to be library books.
Exclusively library books.
It is only library books, yes. So we're working on that. I will get through them quickly so I can go back to my shelves. Because Perfume and Pain, I own. I have it on my shelf. I got it from Aardvark. But before we get into our TBR spotlight, what are you obsessed with this week?
My obsession this week ties into what it was last week, which was, well, I think I had mentioned lock picking last week, but also building the workshop. And I have started on that.
Well, that's good.
I'm very excited to start woodworking and doing other crafty things in the garage. I have a workbench that I ordered, which people were like, why don't you build one? And my reasoning and what I actually did the math on was the lumber that I would get from this deal that I found online was worth it versus buying all my own. So that's my reasoning. If you're like, why didn't you just make a workbench? And also, it's a lot easier to make other workbenches when you have a workbench to work off of. It's kind of like one of those things. It's like, to get it, you already got to have it kind of deal.
That is so true. How are you going to build it if you don't have a bench to build it on?
Exactly. Yeah. So I'll give you my word. My second workbench will be built by myself, but, well, not by myself, but by me, maybe with help from other people.
That's exciting.
Yes, it should be here next week. And then I think I have to assemble it, I would assume.
I would assume it does not come assembled. Most things that you buy online nowadays, furniture-wise, they don't come assembled.
I've also been obsessed with, and this will tie into the end of the episode.
Oh.
But there's a game that I've been playing called Hitman, The World of Assassination, is like the one that has all three of the games. And I played it before on the Xbox, but I got it again recently on my PC, and it's just been so much fun playing that game over again. It's a single player game, and it has incredible replayability. If you're familiar at all with the Hitman series, I would highly recommend checking it out. It's extremely fun. What are you obsessed with this week?
I always ask these questions and then I never have my own answer to them. I don't know. You tell me, what am I obsessed with?
The library.
I'm always obsessed with the library.
Well, it's good to support your library, but I just thought it was funny that you were like, I'm not going to rent any library books. And then like 2 days later, you show me your phone. You're like, look, I've got like 6 library books coming in.
Yes, I do. And I had 4 that I had to pick up today, which are the books on my TBR spotlight today. And then I had one in transit when I went to the library today. So that one is probably going to show up tomorrow or Saturday. Usually they always show up hours after I go to the library and pick up my books. And then I need to go back and get the other one. They all don't show up conveniently at the same time. And then I have another one that I miraculously am 3rd in line for, when I swear just yesterday I was like 40 in line. So I don't know what that's about.
Maybe everyone canceled their hold at the same time.
Well, it might be because our actual library acquired a copy of it.
Oh, I see. And so it bumps you up.
Yeah, because if it had me originally getting a copy from another library that's not our home library, I would have been, super far in line. But if our home library requested it, I get priority.
That's fair.
So, I mean, libraries, they're interesting places. I'm not entirely sure how the hold system works 100% of the time.
They probably have something, like a priority queue system figured out.
It makes sense to them. It doesn't make sense to me. But as long as I get the books, I don't care how it works.
I think that's a fair assessment.
Like anything in life, as long as I get what I want, I don't care how I get it.
Exactly. What more could you need?
Well, unless it's, illegal. I wouldn't do anything illegal.
I wouldn't.
Oh, wink, wink.
Yeah. You've also been obsessed with Grey's. I feel like you've been watching that a lot again lately.
I have been watching a lot of Grey's Anatomy again lately, hence the Owen and Christina reference a few minutes ago. It's just such an addictive show. There are some episodes that I do skip because I have watched it multiple times. So I know there are episodes that I don't like. Like, for example, the musical episode. Oh, I always skip it because I've seen it once. I don't need to see it ever again.
Doesn't everybody skip the musical episodes?
It's just so cringy.
Yeah, I thought that was a big thing online.
Yeah, and then there's also this alternate universe type of episode that is in season 8 that I recently skipped, where Meredith is gonna marry Alex, and Alex is this super goody two shoes guy.
Yes, I do remember that episode.
That episode is also very cringe for me, and I always skip it.
There's another one that I think I'm thinking of. I don't know if it's another musical episode maybe, but there's another one later that's a really weird, cringy one that I feel like everyone skips, but I'm blanking on what it is.
I could not tell you because I haven't seen it yet. I will let you know when I reach a third cringy episode.
I remember the episode I'm thinking of now. It's the one where they're like filming like the office style and like everyone's talking to the camera. But
Oh,
that one's
yeah.
not like cringy. But that
Mm,
was the one I was thinking of.
yeah, it's not cringy, but it's definitely one I skip because I just don't like it.
From what I remember, there's only like one plot point that happens or something like that.
So the show has its highs and its lows. Right now, I feel like we're in a sweet spot of season 8 where it's like, I can't look away. I need to watch. That's why I've been watching a lot recently. So I guess I'm obsessed with Grey's Anatomy and The Library this week.
Some pretty good obsessions.
I know. I didn't even have to tell you. You told me what I'm obsessed with.
Look at that. I'm making up for my missed guess on
You
the
are.
book.
You'll never live that down in your mind, will you?
Nope.
Well, I think it's time to talk about some TBR books. I'm very excited to hear what you have on your list. I know you recently busted out your tablet again so you could read.
And updated my Storygraph.
Yes, I saw you doing that the other day too. So that's exciting. So, what is one book that's on your TBR?
One of the books that I have is called The American Assassin by Vince Flynn. Mitch Rapp is a gifted college athlete who just wants retribution for the Pan Am Lockerbie attack. He trained 6 months intensely with other clandestine operatives under CIA Operations Director Thomas Stansfield and the protege Irene Kennedy to stop terrorists before they reach America. The assassin leaves a trail of bodies from Istanbul across Europe to Beirut, where he needs every ounce skill and cunning to survive the war-ravaged city and its deadly terrorist factions. If this sounds familiar, it is because it is a movie, which I didn't realize until I read the description and then it clicked and I was like, oh wait, I think I've watched a movie of this.
I wouldn't know. I don't watch movies.
It's the one with, I want to say it's Logan Lerman, I think is his name. The guy from the Percy Jackson movies.
Ah, it's Percy Jackson. I'm unfamiliar with the movie, but the book sounds interesting.
Yes. If it wasn't clear, it's fiction. It's also it's marked as a thriller, which I would definitely say that's the case, and it's very fast action paced.
So, why is this on your TBR?
I really enjoyed this movie, but the reason that it initially pulled me in was because since I've been playing the Hitman game, I've been looking at books that are kind of in this genre, like detective-y books again, and crime books, and modern kind of area. And this one just happened to pop up, and I read the description, sounded familiar, enjoyed it, enjoyed the movie, and so I was like, I figured I'd give the book a try. It's also a series, which I didn't know. There's a whole bunch of them. I think there's like 6, I want to say, so...
I love a good series.
Yes, I'm excited.
I feel like series give you so much more depth than a standalone.
Yeah, definitely.
I always find myself gravitating towards series though, which is a problem because then my TBR gets pushed aside and I just have to keep reading the series inevitably.
Yeah, that's one of the big issues that I've noticed. I keep getting drawn towards these series and then I'm like, oh, I'll just read it. And it's like, okay, it's 8 books. Oh, this one's 6 books. I'm like, okay, well, that's 14 books alone added to the list. So,
Yep, it's never ending. Welcome to being a reader.
what is the first book on your list?
Well, the first book on my list is Romancing Mr. Bridgerton by Julia Quinn. It is the 4th Bridgerton novel. And it may sound familiar because the 4th Bridgerton book is actually the 3rd season of the Netflix show. So Penelope Featherington has secretly adored her best friend's brother for what feels like forever. After half a lifetime of watching Colin Bridgerton from afar, she thinks she knows everything about him, until she stumbles across his deepest secret and fears she doesn't know him at all. Colin Bridgerton is tired of being thought of as nothing but an empty-headed charmer, tired of the notorious gossip columnist Lady Whistledown, who can't seem to publish an edition without mentioning him. But when Colin returns to London from a trip abroad, he discovers nothing in his life is quite the same, especially Penelope Featherington. The girl who was always simply there is suddenly the girl haunting his dreams. When he discovers that Penelope has secrets of her own, this elusive bachelor must decide, is she his biggest threat or his promise of a happy ending?
These books always sound so romantic.
That's
Like,
because they are.
I know, but I think there's a lot of books that's like, I don't know, they tie in romance. These are like forefront, punchy in the face kind of romance. And I like it. I think it's fun.
And this one seems like it's definitely obviously, it says on the back, the best friend's brother trope. So we'll see how this goes. I don't really know much about the other happenings. I have not seen the Netflix show. I don't know what happens in season 3, even though I'm pretty sure everyone online has said that season 3 strayed from the actual book a lot. So the show is probably hugely different from the contents of this book. But I'm interested to know if it's going to be like another fairy tale retelling like the last one I read was a Cinderella reimagining. So I wonder if there's going to be any fairy tale themes in this book as well. You know, I actually haven't looked it up if all of the books in the Bridgerton series are a reimagining of some sort of fairy tale. I should look that up because
That would be cool.
it would be cool. I haven't noticed it in 2 of the books, but sometimes I'm blind to that stuff and I don't catch it.
Yeah, maybe it's like deeper seated or something in there.
Yeah, I feel like with reimaginings, sometimes it's hard for me to connect the dots. But I'm excited for romancing Mr. Bridgerton. I'm excited to finally be on Penelope and Colin's story. I think it's going to be fun.
I did not realize the best friend's brother was a trope.
It is a romance book trope, and it's one I usually do not read because I think it's super cringy.
Yeah, I could see that being kind of cringy. That's interesting. I guess we'll see how it goes, though.
We'll see how it goes. I mean, it is Bridgerton, so I'm already biased because I liked the first 3. I think I actually rated the first 3 books all 4 stars. So they've been very average for me, but they've been a little above average because, like, I feel like 3 stars would be like your middle of the road romance kind of book, which they kind of are, but also there's just something about them.
I really feel not to like I have not read these books, so this is not a bash on the books, but I really feel like because of the era that they're written in, it does huge favors for the like concept of the book, which probably is what makes people because I mean the old eras like that can already be very appealing. So when you write I'm assuming fantastic novels, then it's probably very easy to suck somebody into it and they just can't get out of it.
Yes, I can tell you right now, if these were written in modern times, if it didn't take place in the Regency era in England, I probably would not like them.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think it's, and I mean, props to the author because obviously all that stuff was very well thought out.
Oh, yeah, you can definitely tell she had a plan. What's up next on your list?
My next one is called Assassin's Creed Renaissance by Oliver Bowden. Betrayed by the ruling families of Italy, a young man embarks on an epic quest for vengeance during the Renaissance in this novel based on the Assassin's Creed video game series. To eradicate corruption and restore his family's honor, Ezio will learn the art of assassins. To his allies, he will become a force for change, fighting for freedom and justice. To his enemies, he will become a threat dedicated to the destruction of tyrants abusing the people of Italy. So begins an epic story of power, revenge, and conspiracy.
That's interesting. It's based on a video game.
Yes. So for the gamers out there, you're probably familiar with the Assassin's Creed. This takes place following Ezio, who's the second assassin, I guess, that it follows his story. There's like 3 games that revolve around him. And from my understanding, this is the story of the second game. So there's a game called Assassin's Creed 2. It follows the first 3 books, I believe, follow 2, then Brotherhood, then Revelations. Oh, you know what? That's actually not correct. The 3rd book is The Secret Crusade, which I believe is based on the first game with Altair. But there's a whole bunch of books that follow pretty much all the games. There's actually, I think, 10 of them, and there's 8 that follow like the official series as far as I can tell.
Well, hopefully the book is good and it's kind of actually like the game.
Yeah, I'm very excited for it actually because the story of the Assassin's Creed games is really, really good. I found it very, very interesting, especially the first like 4 games because they all kind of follow the same plot line. It's super interesting. So I hope the book definitely gets a chance to like expand on that. And since I kind of already know the characters and I kind of know the plot line, at least assuming it follows the same one, then it really just gets to emphasize the writing and maybe deepening the characters.
Yeah, that'd be good.
What's next up on your list?
Next up, I have The Third Victim by Lisa Gardner, which is the second in the FBI Profiler series. An unspeakable act has ripped apart the idyllic town of Bakersville, Oregon, and its once peaceful residents are demanding quick justice. Though a boy has confessed to the horrific crime, evidence shows he may not be guilty. Officer Rainey Connor, leading her first homicide investigation, stands at the center of the controversy. It's hitting too close to home, bringing back her worst nightmares. But with the boy's life at stake, she won't let anything stop her from finding the real killer. With the help of FBI profiler Pierce Quincy, Rainey comes closer to the deadly truth than she can imagine, because somewhere in the shadows a man watches her and plots his next move. He's already shattered the community, but what he's really come for is Rainey, and he won't leave until he has destroyed her.
Sounds very suspenseful.
Yes. So the first one in this series, where we had our introduction to FBI profiler Pierce Quincy, was The Perfect Husband. And I recently finished it and immediately had to put The Third Victim on hold at the library. The Perfect Husband was amazing. It was like a raunchier version of Criminal Minds.
Like gorier?
Gorier and more like saucy.
Okay.
Like imagine the characters like having relationships.
Gotcha. Okay.
So it was like that. But it was actually very well done, and it was like so gritty and like just mind-blowingly amazing in my opinion. The way Lisa Gardner laid out the story, it kept it fresh and it kept it interesting. Obviously, we had our super eerie prologue, like, ooh, what's going to happen? She threw in a interview transcript from when the killer was being interviewed by the police. And the entire book was basically like a manhunt. It was like a cat and mouse game searching for this killer because he was still on the loose. Or he actually broke out of a high-profile prison. So he was smart. He had a brain. And the twist in there, I did not see coming at all.
Sounds like that one was really good.
Oh, it was amazing. I could rave about it forever, but we don't have time for that. So I'm very much looking forward to diving into the next one, The Third Victim. And it's interesting that this series is based around this FBI profiler, Pierce Quincy, because he wasn't super present in The Perfect Husband. He was kind of just like off to the side. He had a couple mentions here and there, but maybe he'll have more screen time in this book. We'll just have to see. Probably the book I'm going to start reading tonight.
All right. My next one, this is also another series.
You love series. Well, I love series too. I mean, look at us. We're just reading series.
This one is called Scythe by Neil Schusterman. A world with no hunger, no disease, no war, no misery. Humanity has conquered all those things and has even conquered death. Now scythes are the only ones who can end life, and they are commanded to do so in order to keep the size of the population under control. Citra and Rowan are chosen to apprentice a scythe, a role that neither wants. These teens must master the art of taking life, knowing the consequences of failure could mean losing their own. This is the first novel of a series written by Neil. I believe this one was 6 books.
6 books isn't bad. I feel like if I read a series, though, that was like more than 6 books, I'd be kind of annoyed that I had to read that many books just to get to the end. But I shouldn't be talking because I read Sarah J. Maas books, so.
On Storygraph, it's telling me it's 3.5 books because the half one is some short stories, but I could have sworn I saw there was more on Kindle when I looked before. So
I wonder if it's kind of like that thing where not all 6 are necessarily in the series. It might be like 2 series that are in the same world.
That might be possible, yeah. Regardless, it sounds like it's, for the most part, a trilogy with some short stories at the very end. So maybe not as bad as I originally thought.
Trilogies are much easier to trudge through than entire series.
Yeah, this one definitely sounds interesting. It's a bit out of my wheelhouse with the fact that it's a young adult and it's also dystopian. I feel like I don't read a lot of those. Those are pretty synonymous with science fiction at this point. But normally I'm just on the pirates in space kind of thing. Science fiction, not dystopian science fiction. So we'll see how this goes.
Sometimes I like a good young adult book. Sometimes they don't really seem like they're young adult. A lot of people associate young adult with like poor writing or like amateur writing. That's not the case. A young adult book can be written very well. The themes are what make it a young adult book.
That's why I was like kind of surprised that this was geared as young adult, because I was like, this is essentially entirely just about the concept of death.
Is it told from a teenager's perspective?
I think that's the part that makes it young adult, because the two what seem to be the main characters are both teens.
That would be why it's a young adult novel.
We'll see how it is.
Well, up next, I have a book that is not about death. It is called Funny Story by Emily Henry, and this one is currently making its rounds on Bookstagram and Book Talk and wherever you get your book recommendations, because it is Emily Henry's newest release, and I believe it came out in May or June recently, very, very recently. I've had this on hold at the library for a very long time, so maybe it came out in April. Actually, I think it came out in April, now that I think about it. And I need to read it because I need to know why everyone is raving about it. And also, I didn't mind Emily Henry's last release, which was Happy Place. I loved Happy Place. A lot of people, though, if you're an Emily Henry stan, do not like Happy Place because it was very different than her other books. But I'm not going to get into that because I'm here to talk about Funny Story. Daphne always loved the way her fiancé Peter told their story. How they met on a blustery day, fell in love over an errant hat, and moved back to his lakeside hometown to begin their life together. He really was good at telling it, right up until the moment he realized he was actually in love with his childhood best friend, Petra, which is how Daphne begins her new story. Stranded in a beautiful Waning Bay, Michigan, without friends or family, but with a dream job as a children's librarian that barely pays the bills, and proposing to be roommates with the only person who could possibly understand her predicament, Petra's ex, Miles Novick. Scruffy and chaotic, with a penchant for taking solace in the sounds of heartbreak love ballads, Miles is exactly the opposite of practical buttoned-up Daphne, whose coworkers know so little about her, they have a running bet that she's either FBI or in witness protection. The roommates mainly avoid one another until one day, while drowning their sorrows, they form a tenuous friendship and a plan. If said plan also involves posting deliberately misleading photos of their summer adventures together, well, who could blame them? But it's all just for show, of course, because there's no way Daphne would actually start her new chapter by falling in love with her ex-fiance's new fiance's ex, right?
I think I got twisted up at the end there.
So Daphne is roommates with her ex-fiance's new fiance's ex.
I see now. Okay.
Yes. So I mean, I guess if she gets together with that guy, she will always sort of have that tether to her ex-fiance.
Yeah, true.
Because he is the ex of her ex-fiance's new fiance. I can see how that gets confusing.
Yeah. It seems like a fun story, though. I know it literally says funny story, but...
It does. It seems like it's going to be good. Obviously, a romantic comedy. I love me a good romantic comedy, especially one that's actually funny. So I hope this is actually a funny story.
But
we need a cymbal crash there.
Yeah. Bunch of people clapping in the background. Woo, yeah.
But the book itself looks really thick for a rom-com.
That's what I thought when you first picked it up here. I was looking at it, I'm like, that is a big lad there.
There are a lot of pages, and it's kind of scary because usually when I think of rom-coms, I think of no longer than like 315 pages, but this one is kind of looking like it's 400. Let's find out. It is 384 pages in the hardcover.
I mean, that's a pretty good size. If that was any smaller, it'd definitely be over 400.
Oh, yeah. If it was like a short little book, like I have those 2 mass market paperbacks from the library. If it was like that, which thank God they don't publish contemporary romance in mass market paperbacks anymore, because I hate those things. You always have to break the spine. No matter what, you have to break the spine in order to read the book. But I'm looking forward to reading it. It's mainly on my TBR because it is super hyped on Instagram right now. And I got to know what the hype is. And I don't mind Emily Henry. I've read Beach Read by her and Happy Place. And I enjoyed both. Happy Place was a 5-star. Beach Read was, I think, a 4-star. But I read it before I really started rating. So I don't really know.
The next book on my list is called Snapshot by Brandon Sanderson. Snapshot is a science fiction detective story following Anthony Davis, a cop assigned to snapshot duty. In this vivid world that author Brandon Sanderson has built, society can create a snapshot of a specific day and time. The experiences people have, the paths they follow, all of them are real again for one day in the snapshot. All for the purposes of investigation by the court. Davis's job as a cop on snapshot duty is straightforward. Sometimes he is tasked with finding where a criminal dumped a weapon. Sometimes he is tasked with documenting domestic disputes. Simple, mundane. One day, in between 2 snapshot assignments, Davis decides to investigate the memory of a call that was mysteriously never logged at the precinct, and he makes a horrifying discovery. This book is written by Brandon Sanderson, who has a notorious name in like the fantasy and really just writing world.
Yes, a lot of people love him.
Yeah, and this is going to be, I believe, my first time ever reading one of his books. I can't think of another book. I mean, he's written so many, but I can't think of one that I've read by him before. So I'm very excited for this. And it's also a novella, so it's only 123 pages.
Oh, good. Easy.
Right. Like I kind of want to make this might be my next read after the book I'm currently reading, which I'll talk about later.
Yeah, that'd be good. I'm also intrigued by Brandon Sanderson. Part of me wants to try reading some of his stuff as well.
I've heard, and I've talked about this before, I think, was the Mistborn series. I've heard that's incredible, and a lot of people rave about it as like a great starting point if you want to read, especially if you're like not super into fantasy. I guess that's a really easy one to kind of digest. So I know that one's on my TBR for sure. I just got to find it somewhere.
I've also heard that about Mistborn. All right, the final book of our TBR Spotlight is one that has such a gorgeous cover. Like, do you see that?
It is very pretty. I like the shimmer.
This book is Tales of the Celestial Kingdom by Sulin Tan. And as you well know, I have read her Celestial Kingdom duology, which has Daughter of the Moon Goddess and Heart of the Sun Warrior. Fantastic duology, by the way. So good. I definitely loved the second one more than the first, but still, cohesively, when you put them together, amazing. Mind-blowingly beautiful story. Also sad and tragic. So just beware, it's not always happy. So Tales of the Celestial Kingdom is just a little additional story. It's under 200 pages long that I believe it comprises of various short stories about different things that happened in the actual books. So it's kind of just like additional content if you want to read more about the Celestial Kingdom. You need your little fix before we say goodbye to the Celestial Kingdom. I believe this author is writing another book that's set to come out, I believe, next year, but I know nothing about it. I don't know if it's going to be taking place within the Celestial Kingdom or if it's going to be like a whole new world, but I do know it's supposed to be a standalone. It's not part of the Celestial Kingdom duology, obviously, because it's a duology, it's finished.
Right.
Although I do think she kind of like left room at the end of Heart of the Sun Warrior where if she wanted to do something else, she could. So we'll just have to find out what it's going to be. But I really like her writing, so I will be reading that whenever it comes out. So Tales of the Celestial Kingdom collects 9 stories, 7 original and 2 previously published, including the long-anticipated epilogue to the duology. Oh my god, I will get my answers to the duology in this book.
There you go.
I don't like that they call it an epilogue, though. We know how we feel about epilogues over here.
That's true, yeah.
So it's filled with magic and mythology, friendship, rivalries, love, and these stories intertwine through the past, present, and future of the two novels, told from the perspectives of our characters from those novels. And this book also has illustrations inside. So it's illustrated by Kelly Chong, in case anyone was wondering who the illustrator is. So I'm very excited to dive into this. It is short and sweet. And I heard that this one is actually kind of sad. So we'll be saving this for another day. It's actually on my TBR because I saw someone's review on Instagram saying that this was like a beautiful wrap up of the duology. And it was like so, like it kind of like just made everything make sense, I guess. And they gave it 5 stars. Whereas they also gave Daughter of the Moon Goddess and Heart of the Sun Warrior 4 and 4.5 stars. So, I mean, we're on the same wavelength with the other 2 books. So maybe we'll be on the same wavelength with this book.
Yeah, I guess we'll see.
But that's Tales of the Celestial Kingdom by Su Lin Tan. So we have some really amazing books on our TBR piles, and I'm very much looking forward to diving into my library books. Those were actually all library books that I read from. I read from the actual book. I didn't even read it from Goodreads. So the information you are getting about those books is straight from the source.
That's true. Right here, fresh off the vine.
Very excited to dive into all of those. I think my next one is actually for real. It's going to be the Lisa Gardner one that I just talked about. So I'm excited about that.
I definitely think my next one is going to be Snapshot. I know that I want to get back into the Witcher books, but I think it's going to be Snapshot. Something about it just seems so intriguing to me.
I mean, you got to read what you want to read. If you try to force yourself to read a book that you don't really want to read in the moment, it's just not going to end well. Trust me, I've been there.
Yeah, that's true. I just got to embrace the vibes-based reading.
You got to be a mood reader.
Yeah, true.
Being a mood reader is amazing. Like, literally, if I'm not vibing with a book, I'll just stop reading it.
Goodbye.
Yeah.
See ya.
Goodbye, book. I mean, if I own it, I will trudge through it. But if it's from the library, I'll be like, okay, maybe I'll just put this on my list to check out at a later date because obviously I'm not enjoying it right now.
That's fair. I think it's a good idea.
But have I ever picked up a book again that I haven't finished? The answer is no, I have not. So.
But you always could.
I always could. But so far, if we're looking at trends, it doesn't look good for picking up a DNF. So now that we have chatted a little bit about our TBR stacks, what are you reading this week?
This week, I'm on not a Witcher book. It is called The Killer by Tom Wood. This is part of the Victor the Assassin series, which, as I kind of hinted at earlier, because I've been really into the Hitman games, which follow the story of an assassin, I decided to look up if there's any books that are like that game. And this is the one that was recommended to me by the books subreddit, where I get all my recommendations for the most part. And this is the Kindle version, so that's important. There's another one called The Hunter, which seems to be a little bit longer, and that one is the physical copy. So I'm not sure what the differences are. I haven't looked it up yet because I didn't want to spoil anything for myself.
Well, sometimes if books are published in one country versus another, they give them different titles.
See, that's one of the things that I thought too, because the author, if I'm remembering correctly, is British. So I think The Hunter might have been printed in England, and then The Killer was the one that got put on Kindle to be distributed everywhere.
I mean, one could argue that a hunter and a killer is the same thing.
Yeah, true. The part that I thought was interesting, though, is it kind of seemed, because all of the covers of the books have like a little tidbit of like, you know, yada yada, the killer. And so it's supposed to like tie into the name of the book. And The Hunter had a different verbiage on the front, which made me kind of think it was a different story. But knowing what I know so far about the book, I'm only 31% of the way through. You could definitely argue that The Hunter and the Killer are the same thing in this. Like, to me, they are synonymous, especially with the way the story is going. But it is incredibly addictive. Something about this book is just, I think it's because the chapters are short, so it just feels like it's blowing through it, and every single chapter has something interesting. That's the part that I love about it. It's labeled as fast-paced, which I definitely agree, and you constantly feel like something is happening and new things are showing up and there's just action, like literally every chapter. So it's fun. I really love it.
That's good. I really enjoy when books are genuinely fun to read.
Yeah, this one literally feels like I'm almost like watching a movie because of the pacing of it. And the best part is there's 12 in the series with a 13th coming out, I believe, this year. So I've got a lot of them to read.
That is one heck of a series.
Yeah, it's almost on par with the Dresden Files, which has like 19 books or something like that.
Oh man, how do people stay dedicated? Because I feel like I would lose interest halfway through.
Do you mean like reading?
I mean, like for the series. Like
Yeah.
if there's 19 books in a series, it's going to take me the rest of my life to finish the series.
I think it's one of those things like if you really love, you have to really love the character or characters if there's multiple. Because otherwise you just can't. Because, you know, in theory, it's the same character or maybe a couple characters throughout every single book. So,
Yeah, that's true. But I feel like I would just I would have to be reading different books in between each one. Otherwise, my whole life would just be that series.
I definitely think that's fair, especially with, I've like learned better from reading The Witcher. I'm like, you need to have a gap book, I think.
Yes. Yes. I'm a very strong proponent of you don't have to read every book in a series one right after the other because it can get boring.
It's monotonous, yeah.
Yeah, it's just the same. You need like a palate cleanser.
Cleansing the palate. I definitely think that this is a fantastic book, though. So if you heard me mention the video game earlier and you're like, hey, I really like that video game, this might be a fantastic book for you.
Well, I like literally an hour ago finished my current read. And so now I'm kind of like in limbo. I guess I'm going to start currently reading that Lisa Gardner book. But also, I'm currently reading The Mark of Athena by Rick Riordan. It is part of the Heroes of Olympus series. And it is actually really, really good. It follows Annabeth more on her journey to that. I don't really know. Her quest is like the Mark of Athena. Like she has to do something with Athena. And we're getting there. We're going to figure out what's going to happen. Almost done with it. It's for my Percy Jackson buddy read, by the way.
Always back to that buddy read.
Always back to the buddy read. But this book is actually really good. And it's kind of it combines the characters from The Lost Hero and The Son of Neptune. So we're getting the new characters mixed with the old, and it's good. Like it combines Percy, Annabeth with Jason and Piper and Hazel and Frank and Leo, and it's good. Obviously, I don't like all of the characters, but that's to be expected when you have so many.
Yeah, definitely.
Obviously, Percy is my favorite because who doesn't love Percy?
I mean, he's the main character. Yeah, you gotta like him.
He is the main character, but one could argue that Annabeth is the main character in the story because it is about Athena. Spoiler, she's the daughter of Athena.
I think that's revealed in the first book.
I am pretty sure the very first Percy Jackson and the Olympians book, I'm pretty sure that's revealed.
Yeah, if you haven't gotten to that one yet, we apologize.
Yeah, if you haven't read Percy Jackson and the Olympians, which has been out since the 2000s.
I think that's on you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's not my fault that I'm spoiling things. This book has been out forever.
You've had more than enough time
You've had
to read it.
20 years to read it. I don't know.
Oh, geez. Yeah, when did that come out? Let's make everyone feel old really quick. Hold on.
I'm pretty sure it came out in 2005.
The movie came out in 2010. Is that right?
Okay, well, when did the Lightning Thief book come out?
Yeah, 2005.
It just felt like 2005 when I read it.
June 28th, 2005. We just passed the 19th anniversary of this book.
So that's where I'm at with my reading, in limbo with deciding another current read and reading The Mark of Athena, which is very good. So I'm looking forward to figuring out what I'm going to read next. Now, before we sign off, you recently redid your cornbread catastrophe.
I did. That's right.
And it turned out well the second time.
It turned out edible.
Yes, because we figured out what you were doing wrong.
Yes.
You just didn't know how to interpret the one paragraph.
It is a great example of asking someone to double check your work is pretty much what it was. So in the cookbook, the first time that I had made it, I read this recipe probably 20 times, especially this one portion where I just couldn't seem to wrap my head around what it was asking me to do.
Why didn't you ask me the first time?
Well, I was just convinced. I was like, it has to be this way. I can't imagine you would do it any other. Basically, the way that I was reading it, I'm not going to go read the whole thing for everybody, but the way that I was interpreting the instructions was I thought I was supposed to pour half of the cornbread batter into the pan and then whisk in because you make it with lard. I thought you were supposed to whisk in the lard to itself. Turns out you're supposed to do the opposite. You're supposed to melt the lard and then pour half of that into the cornbread batter instead of pouring the cornbread batter into it. So then when I made it the second time, I did it correctly. After, again, I read it like 10 times. And then I was like, could you just go over here and read this for a second? And then you even read it a couple of times before you realized what it was trying to say. So I'm not taking entire blame for that. The wording, I think, could have been a little bit more deliberate.
The wording was not very clear on that one part, so you're probably not the only person in the world who has made it the wrong way, but it definitely makes sense why the first one had zero flavor.
Yes. That explained a lot because it was like it didn't taste like anything.
And like,
this time,
even though he says it's supposed to be bland, it's not supposed to taste like nothing.
right, that tasted like literally just cornmeal. Like,
It was like so grainy too. I was like, this can't be. Something went wrong somewhere.
yeah. But this time around, it was definitely edible. It even tasted good, I would argue.
It's still good. I reheat it and it's still good.
Definitely, though, my northern palate likes sugar. So, like, I feel like I need to put a little bit of sugar in there. I just don't know how it's going to react with, like, the oven and everything. But it definitely was good. It looked good. I took a nice picture of it. It was tasty.
It was good. It was really good with some eggs, dipping it in the runny yolk.
It definitely, now that I've made it correctly, though, I get what he means by it's, like, bland. But it doesn't taste bad. It's just intentionally bland. So you want to put some, like, gravy or egg yolk or something like butter, definitely loads of butter, but preferably something with more flavor. Next up on my list is the pan cubano bread.
Yeah, I'm not really sure what that is, so I'm interested to see how that turns out.
I guess I just said pan cubano bread, which is Cuban bread. From my understanding, it's the bread that you're supposed to use to make a Cuban sandwich, and it seems pretty good. It's like designed to be put in kind of like a panini or crunched down and toasted. It's like deliberately made that way. Or from my understanding it might have just been a nice coincidence. Babish recommends it as sandwich bread or garlic bread. And I'm excited to try that one too.
Looking forward to trying all of it. So I'm just about ready to figure out what I'm going to read next. And you're probably wanting to go read whatever you're reading right now. I can't remember the name of it. The Killer, whatever it's called.
You're right. It was The Killer.
I was right. I pay attention sometimes. So I hope everyone has a fantastic week and we will see you soon. Happy reading.